Welcome to Marketing Rebels Breaking Business Barriers. You've joined us for a special series called Marketing Momentum for Mental Health. We have Nemisha here today, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself, why this topic matters to her, and why it should matter to you. Nemisha, welcome back to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. And well done you for allowing this beautiful series, but the depth of this topic to be put out there in the world. I'm so grateful for you and everyone who gets the opportunity to experience such goodness from so many different beautiful souls. So thank you.
Wow, goodness, now I'm all bashful. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Nemisha, because you are one amazing person who has been through some highs and lows and navigated that space with a lot of grace and honestly inspiration.
Oh, well, you're amazing. So thank you. My name is Nemisha Patel Owen. I am a mindset coach and meditation guide, predominantly working with high achieving women, which is me, of course. Yes, I guess the story is that I worked on myself and did my inner work to get me to this place. And I love the word that you use, which is grace, which is such a lovely way to be. And that's what I'm all about. What I do is what I believe, and what I believe is that when we manage our mind and when we connect with our heart, we get to see ourselves and see the world and do whatever it is that our soul wants us to be doing in such a loving way. And that's what I'm all about.
I love that. And what's interesting to me is that, like, we've chatted on a number of occasions in the past. And I know that your statement, I worked on myself first, was a very simple way to say that you were put through the ringer and you rebounded with a resilience that can only be held in a space where you really nurtured your own mental health and well-being. So I'm going to ask you to maybe share a little bit of that story and talk about how you navigated the maze that you were in when you were struggling with, well, of course, your entrepreneurship and corporate life, but then also illness and major life setbacks that you used as a launch pad.
Yes. Yeah.
That was a big ask.
I know. So I was just like, okay, tell me what was the first bit, because I was onto something, and then I was just like, oh yeah, and that and that and that. So there's like so much I could go.
That's right. It is so much. So where does it begin? Let's start at the beginning, where every good story begins.
Yeah, yes. Where is the beginning? I think for me, based on this topic, it really is an opportunity for us to see what is reality and what is going on for us. And I think that's where I found myself, which was, and I describe it as a gift wrapped in sandpaper.
Ooh, that's good.
And that's where I found myself. And it was, it was 2018. 18 years in corporate, climbing the corporate ladder, did some amazing stuff, amazing achievements, got the MBA, met my husband, life was good, had 2 kiddos. All was well, let's just say. But I got sick. Nothing to do with nothing, cocktail of 3 different viruses. And for the first time ever, I was off work, and you could describe on my knees. But that was the moment for me where I grappled with the challenges of what I was facing. My little one was 1, and my daughter was 4, so my boy was 1. So I had that element of being a mum and taking care of them and my duty and responsibility to them. Then I had the work stuff in terms of, the responsibilities, commitments, this whole letting people down, what will they do without me sort of thing. And then it was me. And it's like, oh my God, who am I? And what's going to happen to me? And the uncertainty and the fear and the risk associated to, will I get better?
Yeah. And that lasted quite a while, did it not?
Yeah. So in the end, I was actually off work for 6 months. And it was just this continuous cycle of being signed off work month at a time. And then, I could really sense that this is something serious. The first month I was like, oh my God, this is like, I should be back to work by now. You just can't even imagine. And I just wasn't getting better. Yeah. And ironically, if I may, I lost my voice.
Oh.
It was all here and I lost my voice. But as I say, I kind of describe it as gift wrapped in sandpaper. And thankfully for me, through this process, and that's where this whole kind of mind, body and soul, mental health, spiritual goodness, all the things which for me are all interrelated, actually helped me get through it. And, I feel like I found my voice. It was almost like, there was a part of me that needed to close. So with one closed door, a new door opened.
And so how did I'm curious, because I've reached points where illness overcomes me, or life happens in intensity, but usually it only lasts for a month, maybe two max. I did have a spell a few years ago for about 2 months during the summer that it just was chaos, and I felt really down. I felt very defeated, like what next, right? That sense, when you're doing that on repeat for 6 months or longer for some people, where were you at in your headspace, and what got you to turn that corner to start focusing on? Because I feel like you just described a transition, a very profound transition, in a few words when you said, well, that's when I focused on my heart and soul and body. And I'm like, wait,
What was that?
that was big.
Yeah.
Tell me a
No,
little bit more about that.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. In the moment, it was very real. And, that was a version of me back then. So obviously now I have the learning, and hindsight is a wonderful thing. But in that moment, especially in the early days, yes, it was tough, it was real. And I was very much looking back and looking forward with so much worry and fear and anxiety. And I think for me, it was the present moment was the thing that I really settled into and found a way, because I couldn't change what had happened and I couldn't predict what was going to happen. All I could do was focus here with where I was, what was happening, and see it from a place of goodness. And like, I think the key thing for me, well, there's a few things, but really my mum was so key to that, because she's spiritual, and clearly you turn to your loved ones at that point, because you're not, your colleagues are now a little bit removed because you're at home and they're busy working, and so you tune into your loved ones. And my mum was just there, like day by day by day by day, constantly, not with me physically, but just feeding me all the goodness and reminding me of some of the things that would help. And really, that's what I was doing. So I was sat at my kitchen table by myself. So the kids would go to their respective school and nursery. My husband would go to work. And it was the first time that I was alone. And meditation and journaling and, savoring the moment of where I found myself was the thing that I just kept on anchoring back to. Because my brain wanted to go to, yeah, but what if I don't get better? Yeah, but what happens if? Mm-hmm. And there was so much of that. And I was going through, I lost track of how many blood tests and how many things I was poked and prodded. And, it's just, as you said, it was like one thing and another in terms of me going to figure out what was going on. And, mm-hmm. and nothing was cut. It was all inconclusive. It's like, no, someone of your age, your being, you should just get better.
And yet,
I'm like, well, I'm not getting better. So what's going on?
Yeah. That's frustrating.
Yeah, it
That's
was.
infuriating. Never mind. I can empathize with that space of like, oh,
Just tell
totally.
me. Yeah,
And
tell me what it is, and then I can get better from it.
just give
And it's
me an
just
answer.
knowing. Yeah, you just want to know.
Yeah.
Um,
And so, I mean, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm reflecting on a. I don't know if you've read the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle, but she discusses something different contextually, but something similar, where she would take some time, and I don't know that she called it meditation. I'm going to have to reread it. But she took some time to access her own inner knowing. And I recall her calling it that knowing within yourself. Would you say that, like, when you were able to give yourself that alone time, that time to be present, to meditate, that was a kind of what you were doing, is just accessing that inner knowing of who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like, and that's how I see it, which is it was exactly that. You know, it was a gift wrapped in sandpaper from the basis of, you know, here's an opportunity for me to slow down, to pause, to connect with me, to connect with what's most important to me. You know, what's my purpose? What am I about? Who am I? You know, it's some of these deep spiritual questions, but they're so important for us to explore. And until then, I hadn't.
Right.
And that was what was meant for me. And that's exactly what I got to, which was so beautiful. And yeah, that, and then the idea of, you know, what was happening mentally for me and how that was in my control became the real thing for me that I was unaware of until that moment. You know, it's like the doctors would just kept saying, well, you should be getting better. There's nothing we can do. And I'm very much of, you know, our body's a miracle. Our body's a walking miracle, and it heals itself. And so, like, I'm not one for taking medication without exploring, like, how can I do this for myself? How can I do this
Right.
holistically? And so it was like, oh, this is on me. This is on me. How do I get myself better with my mind and my body and my soul?
That's really interesting. And I want to just put this into, and I knew this, I knew intuitively that this was kind of where we were going to go, because I knew generally what your story was. But now I'm realizing, if we open this up, let's crack this nut open and say, entrepreneurs, typically ambitious people, like you say, high achievers, we tend to get caught up in the busyness, the everyday. What's next? How can I solve this problem? This is a problem, and we need to solve it, and we need to do the next thing and keep going and chug, chug, chug. And it can be really challenging, I speak from experience, to stop, to breathe. And in fact, sometimes, and this is something that I do practice and preach, is to pull back, because we always want to be 3 steps ahead. We want to get the job done. We're ready to go to make our impact. But if we don't take the time to stop and be present, to analyze, who are we? What are we doing? And maybe even to pull back and reassess, so that we can move forward in a different trajectory, at a different pace, something more sustainable, more effective, impactful for ourselves and those around us, then we could get caught in that space of what ifs. We can get caught up in that space of not doing anything, either by force because of illness, or as a function of our own ambition. It's almost that reverse, right? Like you say that it was a gift wrapped in in sandpaper. Sorry. It's almost like the reverse, where like it looks pretty on the outside, your ambition, your motivation, but on the inside, it's not so pretty if you don't take that time. What do you think about that notion?
Yeah, 100%. And if someone would have said to me, you know, like, you got to slow down, you would like, no, like, that's just counterintuitive. Like, no. No, we're not slowing down. We've got things to do here, you know? But as I say, because that's where I found myself, I saw the beauty in that. And then it was a matter of actually being able to see that it's not about the doing, it's about the being. And it's who are you being when you're doing the doings. At that time, my doing was get out of bed, like get out of bed and be there for my kiddos and take care of myself. But even then, it was who am I being when I'm doing that? Am I being the person who is, like fearful of what's going to happen? Or am I being the person who is here in the moment, eyes wide open, able to get out of bed and grateful to get out of bed and, grateful to have children to like give me a purpose to get out of bed and see all those good things and let that fuel me versus, all the fear and the anxiousness and the anxiety and the not knowing.
Right.
That was real. But you have to practice that. That is something you have to practice that comes. And that's what I learned, that actually we are here to do. We are human. We're spiritual beings in having a human experience, and the human experience is about making a difference. We are here on this planet to do and make a change. But what energy are we doing it from? And that was what, for me, pausing opened up. And that's what I believe, when you slow down and pause, and what you say, like pull back, that's what that allows you to do, is to check in with yourself and see where you're operating from.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of times when I'm telling people, even just, about marketing yourself as a business and as a person, because I believe that we're never not marketing, it's that idea of working in alignment with your purpose, the way you describe it, or your goal. And from where you're coming from, what's your intention? What are you being? It's that trajectory. And if who you are and how you're functioning as your being is not in alignment, if you're actually functioning from a place of fear, you're actually taking yourself away from your purpose and making it harder to get there. Whereas if you were in a space where you're functioning in a place of gratitude and presence, and purpose, then you're going to get closer and closer to that goal, to what you're meant to be doing, to your health, physical, mental, emotional health. You're able to function in that space better when you're intentionally being present, yourself, authentic, connected, all of those amazing things, whatever it's true to you. You'll be able to accomplish those things a lot faster. Sometimes I guess that takes slowing down, stopping.
Yeah. And for me, like, what does that mean? What does that look like practically? For me, that actually is taking a moment to reflect. And that could be 1 minute, even, like just taking a moment to breathe, right? It could be as simple as that. Or it could be taking a walk, or it could be having a cup of tea, or it could be journaling, or like you get to decide. Stopping or slowing down, however it's not like this big chunk of time where like you do nothing and you just wait for something to fall out of the sky. It's like, no, you get to decide what that looks like for you. And sometimes it could be a luxurious amount of time. I don't know, you might have go on a retreat, you might have a holiday, you might, it could be something completely different that takes you away from some busyness or something that's keeping you stuck perhaps, or overwhelmed.
Right.
But other times it could be literally just taking a deep breath, just stepping away, getting some sun, whatever it might be. But something I was going to say, actually, that what the thing for me in making it real and making it practical is like, for me, what I did in that moment, and what I that consistently use and certainly teach is about control.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, it was really reminding myself and grounding myself in what is in my control. Because at that moment, it felt like there was so much that was not in my control.
Right.
Right. And it was like, okay, I'm in the hands of the gods. I'm in the hands of the doctor, in the hands of so many external factors. But I kept on coming back to, okay, yeah, but what is in my control? What is in my control? And what was in my control is like, who am I being? What am I thinking? What am I feeding myself in terms of my mind, body, and soul? And when I tuned into that, I kid you not, that was the turning point. Because until then, what I was feeding myself is a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of not knowing. And like you say, frustration in, oh, but I wish I just knew. And, like, oh, I've got to go for another appointment. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And what about this? What about? And there was just so much noise. And I was like, no, let's look at this differently.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know you and I both having our children, we know that what we feed grows, because those little minions we have, they are consistently growing. How are their feet so big already? I don't understand. But that it's true. What you feed grows. So if you're going to feed those negative thoughts, if you're going to dwell in that space, it's going to grow. Versus if you're going to feed and dwell in the space of possibility, opportunity, self-love, that's going to grow.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to take a moment, though, to talk about what you said there. You get to decide how you nurture that space, whether it's a short journal or a deep breath or meditation or even a retreat. Those are all really great ways to maintain your equilibrium when it comes to your mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health. And if you don't do that, if you don't intentionally do that, your circumstances will make you. And would it be a fair statement to say that, for lack of a better word, it's a very broad word, the universe maybe said, hey, Nemisha, you're not really feeding the right parts of yourself. And the universe says, hey, now you're sick. Now we're forcing you to take the time that you ought to have been taking all along. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah. I 100% see it like that. And interestingly, there was a few, there was one or two like snippets that came to me where it's like, oh, here's an opportunity to do something different. And I didn't take it, right? I was just like, no, yeah, but I was in doubt. Oh, yeah, but what would I do? What makes me think I can? Right? Sat in doubt. And then, whatever period later, a few months later, as I say, I got sick. So I was forced to think about this now and reflect on this and reevaluate, more so, to do with priorities. What was most important to me?
Right.
In that chapter of my being.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a rude awakening when you're forced into it. And so, I mean, obviously for anyone who's currently going through a cycle of burnout or chronic illness that really has you stuck and you're in the throes, or you feel like you're constantly doing in your business. And we know that as high achieving, ambitious people in general, whether it's in your career, in your business, you're always looking for the next thing. What's the next thing? Let's go. And you can get caught up in that, and you can ride the high. You can absolutely ride the high. But when you're doing that, remember the word doing, right? You're not necessarily being. If you haven't intentionally worked in that time to be present and connected with your sense of being. And so if you're in that space where you really haven't made that time, I think this might be a good light bulb moment to go, whoa, hold on. Do I want to be forced into a situation where I need to come to terms with this? Or can I take a minute now to reconnect and figure this out? I think this is a really important, concept to come to terms with for anybody who's in those throes, or maybe projecting themselves going, oh, well, you know what? Yeah, I see my trajectory. So now that said, what would you say would be a really great first step for somebody who's already come to that awareness? Oh, hold on, I'm stuck here. I'm not stuck, but I can see where I'm at. I resonate with what Nemisha's saying. What would you say would be a really great step for them to take to internalize, process, whatever? I'm not sure. You're the expert.
Well, first of all, I would just say, like, well done for getting to that point. Awareness is the precursor to choice. So when you know, now you can consciously decide what your next best move is. It's, for me, it's the people who don't know. And that was me, right? I didn't know there was an alternative. And I would love for those people to really think about just how are they feeling? How are they feeling? And that is your best gauge for where you find yourself, no matter what you're doing, no matter what's going on. Just spending, a moment to just feel. And it's like, you will know, because your body will tell you, but you've got to listen to it. And your body will just tell you something. Our body's always communicating with us, and it will tell you something. It will just say, this is not okay. I do not feel good. Or I feel tired, or I feel overwhelmed, or I feel frustrated, or I feel sad or disappointed, whatever it might be. And it's a few words. That is your trigger. That's when you know something is off. It might be something small, it might be something bigger, it might be something at home, it might be something at work, it might be something to do with you, it might be something to do with someone else. Like, who knows? But that is your trigger. How do I feel? And then you can explore and dig a bit deeper. But when you know that you're in that space of something's off, something's not quite right, now you have a choice to unpack it. And that could come through various ways. But essentially, it's talking about it, verbalizing it, journaling it, like trying to get it out of your head. Because when something's in your head, it can be very muffled, it can be very loud, it can be very heavy and confusing and noisy, and you can't make sense of it. But as soon as you speak to it about with somebody that you can, that you feel safe to, or write it down, it's like suddenly you get to see it. And then, as I say, like for me, that is the biggest and most important step, is awareness.
Right. I think that's really powerful, actually. And I had to write this down because awareness is the precursor to choice. And I think that just in reflection, the idea of having a choice, moving forward with intentionality, reclaiming control, those are really big powerhouse moves for high achievers. That's something that, at least in my experience, is very important to me. Right. And something that I like to say is, I say this actually frequently to my husband and different people when they start getting into that space where, you start playing the blame game. Well, circumstances and what is outside of my control, and we start dwelling on that. I often say, why are you giving your power away? Why are you giving your power away? Take it back. Even with chronic mental health concerns, physical concerns, mental and emotional, everything, life, existential craziness going on in the world, there's still something you can control, right? Actually, this might be a funny thing. My husband's uncle once said, because we were driving, and I'm pretty sure my husband got mad at somebody else on the road and started saying something rude. And his uncle said, don't worry about him. You can't stop other people from being a-holes, but you can stop yourself from being an a-hole. So let's work on that, right? Control what is within your control. So I feel like we rode the rainbow of things that we could talk about within this little house here. But I know you have a wealth of knowledge that resides still within you. So I'm going to invite you to share some final thoughts and tell people where they can get a hold of you, because there's so much more we could dive into from here. We just don't have the time today.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, what a deep conversation. I think for me, really, what I love the way that you put those three things together. And that is what I would say for anyone experiencing anything that, feels off. Like, just know that you're human and you get to feel that. Like, you get to feel what you feel. There is no right, there is no wrong. It just is. But when you know that, like, then you can really seek support. And, like, we are not alone. When we have these times and episodes in life where we do feel the heaviness, we do feel like we're alone. But, like, deep down, like, I would just invite you to think about, like, who's one person I could turn to. Zero judgment. Like, be sure to know that that person's there for you, just like you would be there for another. Like, it's totally, you're reliable for someone to reach out to you, and so you have that person as well. And yeah, I mean, we had this beautiful conversation last time, and so it would only make sense for me to mention it here again. The number one tool you have is the power of your breath. And do not underestimate how much your breath can support you in any given moment to do with anything you are experiencing. And if you take one thing away, is just find a way to connect with your breath. And that seriously just means put your hands on your heart, your hands on your belly, and take a deep breath. Because when you breathe, you consciously, you bring calm. It just happens naturally. And that is the number one thing that we can all do. And then you can act.
That's amazing.
So I could go on, but yeah, that was what I would want to leave people with.
So that said, I will let everybody know that if you want to connect with Nemisha, you can go to her website, nemishapatelowen.com. It's in the show notes. You want to connect with her on socials, reach out to her. Trust me, you want to. You say hello and we get hello, how are you doing? It's a beautiful day. It's just everything is sunshine and daisies. It's lovely. Nemisha, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. You're a joy as always. And to everyone else, remember that this is not the end of it. We still have more conversations to come. So make sure that you comment, like, subscribe, and follow to make sure you do not miss out on all of the wealth of knowledge that's coming in this space and beyond. With that, I hope you all have a good, really honestly, from the bottom of my heart, the deepest of my breath,